to Next in Nonprofits. I'm Steve Boland, and I am very pleased to be joined today by Jackie Russell, the founder and president of Teak Media and Communication. Jackie, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I heard a little bit from one of your team members about some thoughts that you have on trying to think through nonprofit communications in these very uncertain times and what's going on. And we're going to dive into that in a moment. I have a lot of questions for you about that topic, and I'm so glad you're willing to do it right now, this early, this recording in February of 2025, and really a lot to say. But before we do that, could you just introduce Teak Media and Communication to people? What do you do there?
Sure. Teak Media and Communication is a PR firm. We represent nonprofits and responsible companies only. We're certified B Corp like Patagonia and Ben& Jerry's. We're a company with a triple bottom line, which means every decision we make, from the cleaning products we buy to the clients we take on, we ask, will this help people? Will this help the planet? And can we make a profit doing it? Three Ps rather than just profit. We're also a founding member of the Boston chapter of Conscious Capitalism, which is an international organization that is made up of businesses that want to run businesses consciously with all stakeholders involved, not just shareholders, but employees, vendors, customers, everybody who is in the vendors, everybody who makes up what a company is, to have all of their concerns in mind as you run the company rather than just focusing on profits and shareholder return. So yeah, that's what we do. We kind of walk our talk and work with the nonprofits and responsible companies only, and we do it in that way.
Great. So public relations has got a lot of different ways people think about it and how to go. But I think right now, as we're recording this conversation, a lot of charitable organizations, public good organizations are thinking to themselves, we don't know what to say or to think, but we have audiences and constituencies and whatnot that are maybe looking to us for some guidance on what to say or think as things are changing just minute to minute sometimes. So before we dive into, all of the different things that one could say, I think an interesting place to begin is to define those audiences, because there are the broad community folks that might be interested, and then there's going to be some closer in stakeholders, maybe your own employees, maybe partner organizations. How do you help people think through who should they be prioritizing talking to when there's a high level of confusion out there?
Yeah. The thing is, though, all of those audiences need communication, and the message might be slightly different for
Mhm.
each. But I don't think it's choosing which. It's going out to, I think what you're getting at, which is really important, is that nonprofits need to be communicating to all of their audiences right now, if for different reasons and in different ways. And the message might vary, but it's really about getting out there and speaking and making sure that your audience is your donors. So your donors, your participants, your volunteers, your employees, your corporate sponsors, that they know what you're thinking and what you're feeling right now and what you're going through, so they can, align themselves with you if they want to support you. Now is a perfect time also to go to all of those constituencies and tell them you still need them. You need them more than
Hmm.
ever now. So being silent in that regard, I don't think is helpful at all. I think the opposite, that you should be talking to your people and the people who have supported you all along, to say, we still need you. We need you now more than ever. We're grateful for you. And here's what we're doing.
So, right ahead of recording, we were talking about there's no one answer to any of these questions that fits every nonprofit mission and organization. You've got to approach that differently for different folks. But just listening to you now kind of talk about that, I think one of the things that comes to me as I talk to some nonprofits is the staff is overwhelmed with communication. The close-in board members are feeling a little overwhelmed. How do we raise that level of concern about the communication strategy to that broader audience too. If they come to you for information, you want to be able to give it to them as much as you know right now. And of course, some of that information may be, we don't have a good answer to that yet. Those kinds of things are fine, but I'm a little concerned about the overwhelm of everybody. And if you just kind of proactively start hitting your audiences with too many messages, does it add? Do they feel like I just got to shut this out? Is that a factor?
I mean, honestly, I didn't look at it that way.
Mhm.
I think that the people need to hear from you, from
Yeah.
the
Okay.
organization. If they're connected to your organization in some way, especially really connected, they want to hear from you now. And I don't think it's overwhelming. They're concerned about you, you're concerned about them, you're concerned about your own organization. And it's a really good time to talk to them about it and to say, we're still here. This is what we're doing. We support you. Thank you so much for supporting us. And we're still partners. We're still here. We need each other more now than ever. I don't see that as a way to overwhelm donors or sponsors or employees or volunteers. I think it says it's a comfort. It feels like a comfort to me to hear from the nonprofits that you support and are involved with during these times, that you know that they're there and they're doing their thing.
Right. So let me ask you about partnerships in organizations when they're kind of all doing their thing, because I do feel like some of these things are hitting different organizational missions at different times. And as an organization that may want to think about itself as part of a broader ecosystem, there may be different times when your messaging has to flux a little based on other communications, other things that are happening out there. How do you coach organizations to think through impact of other focuses maybe being at the top of the list right now, and when do you try to have that conversation with people, or is that not a concern that should be in play here?
I think what you're saying is really important, and the nonprofits that we work with are doing that. So, for example, the National Park Service just lost many employees. The National Park Service funds a lot of historic sites and parks, obviously, around the country. And it affects everybody. These cuts are going to affect everybody, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. You know, you want to go to your national parks during the summer, you want to go to historic sites, you want to be involved with historic, like Massachusetts is involved in the 250th Revolution celebrations that are going on. In this part of the world where we've been around for 250 years, we're starting to celebrate that this year. Well,
Hmm.
so these cuts will affect a lot of organizations that are involved in that. One of our clients, Old North Church and Historic Site, is not directly affected by the funding cuts because they're funded separately, but they are very much a part of the National Park Service and they rely on those people for different things. So they just now are sending out, I mean, because these cuts just happened like Friday, Thursday night. They on yesterday, no, today, rather, Monday, they're putting out a social media post to their people to say, here's what you need to do. You need to support your National Park Service still. You need to go to your Congress people and tell them that you care and tell them why this matters. You need to donate when you can. And again, they're not asking for themselves, they're asking for NPS. So I think that's a really important thing to do for nonprofits to support each other in that way. And I'm glad you asked that question, because it's really not just only talking about yourself, but talking about the broader spectrum of what's going on in the world and how we're all part of it. We're all intertwined. Yeah.
Right. And some of these things again are kind of coming at different places, and I want to ask you a little bit about that concept of some is kind of more bluster, well, we're gonna do this other thing, but there's not actually a proposal yet. There's no executive order. It's hard to make decisions about if that thing happened, that would be our biggest threat, but it kind of hasn't happened. So how do we weigh, like, there's a potential threat out there, but there's actual things that are happening. And, if the potential thing happens, it's really bad. Do we do something proactively versus that might never come to pass because there's a lot of things that are being talked about that don't actually get going, and we should focus over here. And I know we just said a minute ago, and there's no one answer for anybody, but pick a case, if you would, where you could make the argument that, yes, here you should maybe be stepping forward and making the case proactively, even though it may not come to pass, versus, are there times when you think maybe, no, you're going to just let that potential threat be out there with lots of other things that feel scary and challenging and focus on the stuff that's actually happening?
Well, I think nonprofits in general are all in the same position now, which is we don't know if our funding's going to be cut or if we're going to get the money that we've been promised. I mean, they're all in that position because the way that it's been set up these past few weeks is we can do anything at any time without notice and go against laws or promises.
Mhm.
So, of course, nonprofits are really unsure about how to proceed from operational standpoint, logistical standpoint. What are they going to move forward on? Are they going to contract new things that they might not be able to pay for? So I think it's the same uncertainty for all nonprofits that get any federal funding whatsoever. And in this case, I believe it is important to go out to your people, your constituents, your sponsors, your corporate sponsors, your volunteers, all of the people who have sponsored you to say, we need you now more than ever. We're so grateful that you're with us, that we can count on you in good times and in bad. We're concerned, as in every nonprofit is in the country right now. And we're really grateful for your support. And we thank you for being with us. Maybe it's not a direct ask at this moment, but rather just a thank you for being our supporters, because we really feel it now. We know it, how important it is to get funding from other sources and to have the community with you to do
Yep.
this good work.
I mean, an example of this, I think that before the administration changed, there was a proposal in Congress to allow the president to have authority to remove nonprofit status from organizations that are deemed bad. I mean, they sort of said
Yeah,
terrorist, but there's no definition of what that
yeah,
means.
yeah.
So it could have been anybody. And there was a tremendous amount of education and rallying for something that ended up dying in Congress. But I feel like people are waiting for that shoe to drop, right? It's going to come back. We're going to see that same thing again, even though there was a lot of energy to get people to back up and talk to their representatives and all the rest of it for, late November, early December, whenever that time frame was. It was fairly recently. And that level of that could have been a really bad thing had it happened, but it didn't actually end up happening. Again, there was some advocacy, and I think that really helped. But now it's like, do we spend time when that could come back, but all these other cuts are really happening? It is challenging to direct your bandwidth on some things that are a little bit more existential threats versus things that are, really happening right now.
Yeah, no, understood. You can't respond at 11, to
Right.
everything.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, you absolutely have to gauge it. And I think that at least my clients, what I'm hearing from them is they're taking it slowly. They're taking it step by step. They're trying not to overreact. And sometimes, though, overreacting means doing nothing. Like
Hmm.
they could be pulling back just to be silent and putting, hiding under the covers because they don't want to be attacked. And I think that also could be damaging. So it's just different ways of thinking of how are we overreacting here. And I think
No.
sometimes being too silent is one way to overreact as well. But you know what? I just don't want to come across as if I really know what nonprofits should be doing. We do PR, we do public relations. So we talk to our clients about how to message things when they're going out to their constituents. What, depending on what they're looking for. Are you looking for time, talent, treasure? Do you
Mhm.
just want to inform people? getting information out there about the needs that you serve at a time like this is also important. Like, we're here for you too. Depending on what the organization does, there's a whole community out there that are in fear as well.
Right.
The people that our clients serve are also in danger and in risk of having services removed or being deported. I mean,
Right.
really, like, the not getting food.
Hmm.
But so the people that, even education, even what's going on in the schools around here, people are nervous. And so the nonprofits can serve as a source of support for their constituents also, to say, we're still here for you. And I think that people need to hear that.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. I think that's good advice for a lot of organizations. One case that kind of jumps up right now is about the demonization of diversity, equity, and inclusion language across the federal government and community responses to that. So there are some nonprofits who are stepping more into that fray intentionally, but that is making them more of a public target. And then there are others who are, maybe weighing that, like, can we be a public target right now? Can we do that? Or is that going to, be a real challenge? And I'm recording this in Minnesota, where Target Corporation for many years was thought of as, this good progressive community leader. And they were one of the first out of the gates going, no, we're going to back away from all those commitments. We're just going to mothball all those programs. And they've been on the front page of the paper for a good month now about how angry the community is at them for that choice. They could have been a little bit more silent about it, but they issued a press release. Nonprofits, I think, are in this kind of reverse position of that. It's like, when do they step in and say, because this corporate partner is stepping out, we're going to step in and do something. Here in Minnesota, just a quick example, I'll ask you to comment on Twin Cities Pride, the organization that does our Pride Parade in June, had been sponsored by Target Corporation for years, and they declined that sponsorship this year. May not have gotten it anyway, but they publicly went forward and declined it ahead of time, like, we're going to disinvite you from participating. And their donors did step up. They were the ones that came out and said, this is not okay, and we should take a stand. And their donors more than made up the amount of money that Target had ever put into the event. So I do think that there is a communications benefit of taking some direction sometimes. But boy, that's a toughie out there when the entirety of the federal government is trying to scrub this language from the vernacular.
Right. I mean, I think it depends on what the nonprofit does.
Hmm.
Obviously, if they are DEI focused, if their whole thing is social justice, they have to stand up. It's who they are. And if part of what they do is about serving underserved communities, they also need to stand up, because that's what they do. An example of an organization that is not involved in DEI issues, even if, say, it's just not just, but raising money for research for diseases. Actually,
Hmm.
they are, that's they're up against it too, with
Right.
NIH funding being cut.
Yep.
It's everywhere. If DEI is at the core of what you do, you have to stand up and continue to speak for what you do and who you are. If your nonprofit is dealing with other things that are not necessarily social justice or race related, then you should keep speaking to what you do, and you
Hmm.
don't have to say, well, we're backing away from DEI or we're not backing away. Just keep talking about who you are and what you do. There's nothing wrong with that, and I think that that's really important, that nonprofits have to keep doing that. No, I guess what I'm trying to say is, it's not either or
Hmm.
necessarily. Like, what do they do about DEI? Do they go out and talk about how, well, we're still committed to DEI? Or do you say, we're backing away from DEI, which I can't imagine any of them really doing. But if they keep just talking about what is their core, that's important.
Yeah, it is. It's a very, very challenging time to make decisions about what feels like limited communications capacity too. And I think even before the level of uncertainty that we're facing right now, many charities felt like comms work was maybe, eighth on the list of things they were really putting energy behind. And I feel like, it's been given a little bit of short shrift sometimes, and that's challenging. But now that they've been asked to go from maybe not doing it terribly well to doing it a lot, it feels like there's kind of a crash course in trying to be responsive to people when maybe they, again, it hadn't always prioritized that part of their work. It feels like that to me, as somebody who spends more time in fundraising, which is reliant on communication to be effective. As a PR person, do you feel like there are people trying to get up to speed, spending more time on this than they did perhaps, middle of 2024?
You make such a good point that, it is more important now than ever. And I do feel for the smaller nonprofits that have not prioritized it or made the budget for it, and they don't really communicate well, or they don't have somebody in-house to do it 24/7 as they should right now. And I would say to them, find people to help you,
Mhm.
whether you have the money or not. Your board members might have connections to people who can help you on a pro bono basis, to get through these times so that you can communicate more than you're necessarily used to doing.
Yeah, it's a moment to step up, but it is also such a challenging time to get people to focus on doing that when there are so many other things to do. But it's a
Right.
opportunity to build a connection with an audience around a moment, and I hope that that's something that charities can start looking at a little bit more carefully as they think through this. Um, I do want to ask you a little bit about the idea of how the public relations work can impact fundraising, both institutional gifts that might come from government or foundations, but individual donors too that may be responding more from what they hear. Because I feel like there's this fragmentation in the number of outlets and the attention that they get that maybe wasn't the case, even 3 or 4 years ago, let alone 10 or 12. As you think about getting that ask out there, how do you deal with, lots and lots of little niche media channels as opposed to, if we can get on the 1 6 o'clock news, we're covered, right? That everybody's going to hear that. I don't feel like that's the case anymore.
No, it's not. And people say, oh, the media is shrinking, but really it's expanding. And
Mhm.
there's more and more opportunities out there. And if you look at it as a positive rather than negative, then you can leverage it better. And it is about getting out there to all different sources, from legacy media to podcasts to social media. Influencers are big. And also, it's about, I think, getting out to conservative and liberal media. I mean, there's no more pretending that everybody is biased, is unbiased. It's just not the case. Now media is bifurcated, and they will support you as well, but you just need to get in front of them.
Mm.
So I think it's doing more, and that sounds self-serving, but it's really true, that you have to choose to get out in front of many different outlets through many different mediums at this time to get your message heard.
I'm interested in the idea of trying to pitch to folks that you feel like, more conservative audiences, if your nonprofit is a more socially progressive organization, would have been my first thought. How do you think through? 'Cause I feel like in this kind of, 2025 era, there's kind of, writing off like they're just not going to hear me. So why should I take my time? I mean, no matter what facts I present, no matter what arguments I make, it's just not going to be received. So I should use my time elsewhere.
I think that's a generalization. Like, did you watch the Super Bowl?
I did actually this year. I don't usually watch football, but I did actually watch it this year. Yeah.
I thought there were more ads targeted toward humanity, toward every human being than sides this year, and
Mm.
it felt really good. Some of the ads that were about that kid, I think it was a Pfizer ad, and it was about a kid boxing his way out of the cancer ward.
Hmm.
Do you remember that ad?
I don't remember that one, no, but
It was so moving. There were a number of ads of commercials that were super moving, that were neither blue nor red, that just hit to the fact that we all have children. None of us want them to be sick. We all want to help when there is a sick child, for example, or something that can help people who are hungry. And I think it's tapping into that it would be very helpful at this time. Also, there are things so you might not say, we have a solar energy company and a nonprofit that was relying on federal grants
hmm
to help underserved people access funding
hmm
to get solar energy on their own homes, because that's a problem in that, underserved communities who don't have a lot of resources don't necessarily put that money into alternative energy.
right.
So, if they can get the grants to do it, they can do it, and it's helpful for everybody. But the point is that these solar energy or alternative energies, I should say, they also create jobs, and we all want jobs. So if you can frame it in, frame the argument in that way to a media source that this would bring jobs to your community, they might be more interested in writing about it. I think it's how you approach it.
So how do you, at this point, start building those relationships to get access to different voices in different places? It feels like, building media. I've always coached organizations that I've worked with that, you should look at the beat reporters that are covering your area, take them out for, a cup of coffee if they'll let you buy a cup of coffee, but, whatever. Go sit down with them when you don't have a particular story and talk about what you do so that when they do
Yeah.
have a story, they know you. This feels like coming in a little late now to say I would like to know, but you got to start somewhere, I guess. How do you get to
Yeah.
know some of those other audiences or those other outlets if you've just never really made that effort before?
Yeah. I think you start somewhere,
Hmm
right? Start where you are, as they say. And you pick away at it while doing also, but the communication that you have been doing with your usual sources. It's just about expanding out. Using influencers too can be very helpful, I think. But that there's a problem with that in that influencers want to get paid,
Hmm.
and um, nonprofits, don't necessarily have the budgets or make the budgets to
Right.
pay influencers to get their message out there. But what we have found, which can be, and we're really going to build this out now because I think it's so important, is connecting corporate sponsors to influencers and nonprofits, making that triangle so the company pays the nonprofit. Both are now, I mean, the company pays the influencer gets the
Sure.
nonprofit's message out there, and that's a way that corporate sponsors can be helping nonprofits today get their message out, in addition to sponsoring them too. So I think it's like making that triangle is going to be very helpful as we move forward.
No, that's good to think. I want to ask you a little bit about social media because as I look at reports on organic reach for the nonprofit community, specifically organizational pages and whatnot, it just really continues to tank in the traditional large-scale social media organizations. So, looking at different ways of reaching audiences through those tools rather than just, well, we posted on Facebook, just nobody saw it. It's like, well, I don't think that does it anymore. Just, putting up
Mm.
a post from your page doesn't get you the connection to audiences. So as I was hearing you talk about influencers, on certain platforms, there are going to be certain folks that have a bigger voice and making a more intentional effort to reach them with some content so that people might eventually get back to your page, your website, all the rest of it makes sense to me. But I don't know how many people are actually looking at their own, site visit metrics from some of these larger channels. And it's an interesting way of thinking, well, we used to think of social media was free, so we'll just post some stuff there. And some people would be able to just come find it if they were looking. But I do feel like that's a real challenge, more so again this year than maybe in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to boost posts,
Yeah.
pay. It's not a lot of money, to boost, to target your message to your potential followers that you want to engage, engaging on other people's like-minded organizations channels so that there's communication between them, so that that nonprofit sees you and then their people see you. Getting this is something that I think people leave money on the table. Nonprofits leave money on the table here. Corporate, if they would provide social media content to their corporate sponsors, for their corporate sponsors to then
Mhm.
put out on through their social media networks, it's very helpful because now you're reaching thousands of people within that corporation with the nonprofit message in the way the nonprofits want it told. And these corporations will take social media content from the nonprofits. We've seen it happen. It's very helpful. They'll take it, they'll use it. It's a halo effect for the corporation because they're like, look at us. We're affiliated with Big Brother, Big Sister, for example. And then
Right.
they put it out there. They're social now. More people are attracted, more people are seeing what's going on. So there are ways to use social to reach beyond. But yeah, it's not just simply posting.
Well, those two things I heard that are so easy to do but underutilized that you talk about is engaging with somebody else's page and post where the content is aligned and it makes total sense to do. And so many charities will post their own stuff, but not necessarily comment on somebody else's or reshare somebody else's content or whatever to begin that. So I think that's such an easy place to begin to increase your exposure to different audiences. But you're very practical. Just pay to boost some posts. Sometimes it's not that much money. You're like, yep, nope, that's just straightforward. It's not that difficult to do either. I have run into it with some folks that I work with where ads, especially from Meta, were not being accepted because of the words that nonprofits were using. If you're talking diversity and equity issues, you may not get your post boosted. So you may need to look at some other content where they will allow it to get boosted. But something that you're saying is going to be eligible for a boost. Find it and do a few. You don't have to boost every post, but boosting some is not terribly expensive to do if you're going to be in those spaces. So that's important. I'm interested to see if you're in the PR world looking at any of the more niche social players, the Blue Skies of the world, that kind of stuff. Is that anything that people are thinking about, or is it just really the big traditional players that most people are trying to engage with?
I mean, I think Blue Sky is obviously gaining popularity, especially with liberal people.
Hmm.
My clients haven't yet gone there.
Okay.
And I think that goes back to what you were talking about before, which is it can be overwhelming. Resources might not be what they once were, or,
Right.
You've got to just focus on what you've got rather than going to new platforms. If at
Hmm.
least make sure you're doing what you have well before you go out to new platforms. But I think it's just a matter of time. I hope that they will, but really it's about utilizing the platforms that you have. You think you can find influencers as well who will support nonprofits without getting paid. They will do it here and there. It's not,
Yeah,
I mean,
based
they
on your
want to get
mission.
paid, of course, but if,
Um,
yeah, exactly. If
Some
you,
missions are easier
that's,
for
and
some
that goes,
influencers to find. That's for sure.
and also, it's about finding the right influencer. Just
Hmm.
like if you happen to find a reporter who has in their family something that your organization is working for or toward, now you've got them and they'll do your story. So same with influencers too. We're all human beings. And it's about finding and doing the research to find out who is or an influencer who will be aligned with your mission and then make the ask.
Hmm.
Will you do this for us?
So we're starting to run a little low on time. I want to ask you a question about metrics and make sure there's time for you to mention anything that I haven't asked you about that you think is important for charities to be considering in these tumultuous times. But some of this stuff you can get some pretty immediate feedback on. If I send out an email campaign, I generally have a good idea of who's opened it in the first 24 hours and when I might resend and what kind of engagement I'm getting on different platforms. Are you advising different thinking on what a successful metric looks like these days compared to what it is, or is that still pretty understandable?
I don't think we've lowered our standards in
Okay.
terms of what we can expect. No, we haven't. In fact, we're saying push more, push now, push harder. Don't be
Okay.
silent. I mean, in general, those are the things that we're saying to our nonprofits. But I think, something that we haven't talked about that I think is even more important now than ever, which is get your message down. Sometimes nonprofits really don't know what are the key messages that people need to hear in order to join in order to care about what they're doing. I think that sometimes nonprofits, especially if they don't have outside counsel on this, they can just think everything that they do is fantastic, or they might think, they don't even see the beauty in what they do because they're so used to doing it all the time.
Right.
And so they're really not always the best in sharing their message with the people who will really care about it. So I think it's like really important time to get your messaging down. What is the problem that you have that is out there? What are the actions your organization are taking to solve those problems? And what are the results that you are helping to achieve and what the public can see or hope will be achieved as a result of supporting you? And if you put it in that formula, problem, action, solution, it's very satisfying and people can understand it. Sometimes nonprofits are too out there, like big picture, broad, without bringing it down.
Yeah.
Like, what exactly are we going to do? And what are we working for? And what are the goals we're going to achieve? So it's very important, not just to not be silent and to get out there, but to make sure that what you're saying is hitting the people in the right way, that they're going to understand, that they're going to care. So what?
No, those are really important pieces of advice. And again, I think much as it would have been great to have good relationships with traditional media a year ago, and then you'd be able to leverage them better now. Now is the time to get started if you didn't. And same thing with, what's your messaging? If you didn't have really concrete ideas of, problem, action, solution language, would have been great to have a year ago, would have been better to have 6 months ago, but now is good. Let's get going. Let's
Yeah,
start using those
definitely.
those good tools. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I am guilty of overusing the phrase so much that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, but the second best time is now. If you want shade, yeah, go do it 20 years ago. But if you haven't done it yet, get started. Get started now. We don't know
Right.
what's going to be happening 2 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, and planting those seeds now may well put you in a better position that when whatever the next challenge is, your organization's in a place to be ready for it. So as we're getting ready to wrap up, I asked you to think about that piece of wisdom, that nugget about having your messaging down was a really good one. Any other parting thoughts you want to make sure to throw together before we get ready to close today?
I think sharing your good news
Hmm.
through every channel that you can. People need good news
Yeah.
now more than ever. We need those, again, going back to the Super Bowl, we need those ads, we need those stories that are going to tap into our humanity that we all feel, regardless of our political affiliation. So, and nonprofits have a gold mine of these stories. At least the nonprofits that we used to working with, they are heart-wrenching stories. They pull at your heart. They make you feel good. They make you feel like you can be connected to other human beings. We all need that now. So I think that sharing these good stories that you have through the nonprofit, through any medium you have, whether it's social media or traditional media or paid media, or podcasts or influencers, get your good stories out there. People need them. It will attract them to you and make them care about what you're doing and feel connected. And we need that.
That is a wonderful closing thought. I think that's such a strong piece of advice to give some hope and energy and positivity to people that are seeking it in these moments. This is just a great idea. There's something good to say. Find that and bring it to the fore.
Mhm.
Great thinking. Jackie Russell is the founder and president of Teak Media and Communication, and I am so grateful you took the time today. Jackie, thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was really fun. Nice to meet you too, Steve. You're awesome.
Thank you.